On an August afternoon when the mountains were breathing heat and thunder in alternating pulses, a pair of hikers forced the swollen door of a weathered hunter's cabin above Val d'Herens and stepped into air that had not been moved for years. The first thing they saw was a green enamel mug on the table, furred with dust, and the second was a man seated almost politely on the bunk, or rather what time had left of him. A skeleton in a sun-bleached jacket, boots still on, a silver bracelet barely clinging to the narrow, wider place on the bone. On the stool by his knee lay a small black book with an elastic band. On the band, a brittle photograph had been tucked, a woman squinting into light by a lake. The hikers did not run. People think they would. They stood with their packs tight on their shoulders, holding the air in their mouths until the cabin's stillness pushed it back out. His name had been Lukas Amsler, 34 when last seen, a Swiss mountain guide between seasons who paid the rent by working winters on the avalanche control team near Schaun and summers leading slower parties across glaciers. He lived with the predictability of someone who had learned that maps are both truth and suggestions. A slim man with long hands and light brown hair, shaved close for convenience. A quiet talker who liked his tea black with lemon peel shaved into it. Who wore a scarred leather watch strap and a thin silver bracelet he'd once found in a burned flea market and never took off. He kept a small library in his studio in Schaun. Histoires de Alpes Valaisannes, Glacier Studies, a coffee-ringed copy of Frisson Roche, and between the books a photograph of his sister, Pia, with her son on her hip, their hair blown out at the lakeshore, the sky ripping blue above them. He had a habit of writing lists at the back of his guidebook, weather signs, snow grains, slope angles like prayers. The cabin was marked on some maps and smudged off others. A rectangle of larch with a stone roof and a single wire that had once brought a radio signal. It sat where a lateral moraine shouldered into dwarf pine, a little above the tree line, in a place that summer kept for crickets and lightning and winter for the slow engineering of snow. There were nails in the wall for coats, two still occupied, a faded down jacket and a wool peacoat with a missing button. On a hook, a straw broom. On a shelf, a rust-speckled stove and tins so old their labels had turned to hieroglyphs. The hikers, Ariane and Benoit, from Lausanne, took 2 steps in, said each other's names, and then one of them set a palm flat to the table to steady the room. The gendarmerie from Herons came in with the carefulness of people entering a church they haven't paid to. The paramedic looked at the watch the skeleton still wore, stopped at no time in particular, and then at the boots. The boots were well-oiled once and had the stitching of a man who respected both terrain and soles. The bracelet was the sort of market sells cheap, but in the way of such things it had become the one he never removed. The enamel mug on the table, green with a chip at the lip, wore a ghost ring of something dried decades ago. Beside it, the black book with the elastic, field notes. Amsler printed in a right-tilted hand. Inside the back cover, a folded map of the Montmine Basin and a small square of paper with 4 numbers. Someone said, "Don't touch," and everyone felt the pull to do exactly that. He had gone missing during a bad spell. It was late September. The Fen had come early, driving warm, dry wind down the valleys like a hairdryer through spruce. That week, the avalanche bulletin had been written with that special Swiss bluntness. Persistent weak layers, recent storm deposition. Avoid steep lee slopes above 2,500 m. Guide associations sent emails. Lukas had finished a 3-day trek with a German couple across the Chilan Glacier. Texted Pia a photograph of his boots against blue seracs. He always photographed his boots on the threshold of new places, a habit borrowed from a mentor, and then written in his small notebook the line he often wrote before solitary days. Check crevasse bridges by sound, not trust. He meant to go up alone the next morning. Just to the ridge, a recon to scout a new line he'd been thinking about, a traverse that would connect an old shepherd's path to a modern topography of melt. He told no one exactly which cabin he'd end in. He told no one because he was good, and good men in good mountains believe in their own luck. Pia called him that evening. Their call failed, and they messaged instead. Brief. Tomorrow? He wrote. Back before dark. Tea after? She sent a thumbs up, then a heart. A shorthand sibling ritual. In the morning he passed the bakery near the Schaun station, bought 2 pain aux raisins and a lemon, wrote in his little back of guidebook grid. Weather. Finn predicted, NW late. Gear. Stove, 1 gas. Bivy, rope 40 m, screws X2, prob not needed, T plus peel. He wore his red shell and the faded blue soft shell under it, gloves with dubious palms, and the bracelet under his cuff. He parked his silver Subaru at the lay-by just beyond Furpical where the road buckles, nodded to a shepherd with a dog, and shouldered up into the sky. A tourist in a light jacket asked if she could follow him, until it gets technical, and he smiled and said, "Everything gets technical when you are tired," and pointed her to the painted rock where the safe trail peeled left. He went right. Stones made that little music they make under boots when the dew holds just enough water to change friction. He stopped once to drink and write a note. then twice to breathe the thin subtlety of not being where words can reach you. At noon, a cloud drew a line between the sun and the ridge, and the world lost color for a minute. The last person to see him was a cattleman from Les Hodiers who had come up to pull flags off a line before the wind could tear them. He remembered the man in the red jacket. Polite, a nodder, the kind of nod that says both, "I see you," and "I am going alone now." He watched him step onto a lateral moraine and vanish into a swale of dwarf pine. He told the police later, and then again for the official transcript, that the man had moved as if counting, like 1, 2, 3, not in a hurry. When he didn't show for tea, Pia didn't panic the first night. He had a habit of working a day out until the last light. By 11, she tried his phone. It rang and then cut. In the morning, she called someone from the Guide Association. "He'll walk in," her friend said with mechanical generosity. By afternoon, she filed the report. In Valais, they know when to cast the net. Riga scrambled, then waited, the fin pressing the rotor blades down in their hangars. Fixed-wing pilot looking through the clear weather at a wind no pilot can take a bet against. On the mountain, volunteers started from the lower trails with dogs, angling toward the obvious shelters. The first day yielded only typologies, boot tracks smeared by wind, old bivvy sites, a candy wrapper when you wanted a glove. They found 3 newly unstable bridges on the glacier and flagged them. They cut steps where a stream had eaten a Moulin's mouth into a little cathedral. They made an overlay of the map and marked squares as if they were checkers. The squares told them where they had not looked with their bodies. The second day, the wind dropped, and a helicopter stitched the sky with noise, the searchmaster in the co-pilot seat with a tablet, and that terrible hope that the camera might see the rectangle of a parka against white. A farmer from La Sage said he smelled lemon peel at the lay-by where the Subaru stood. He had the kind of nose that makes a man good with cheeses, and the detail was nonsensical enough to make the searchers love him. Pia came and stood by the car and did not look inside, because you only look inside a car when you are ready to see what the absence of your person has arranged itself into. On the passenger seat, a green enamel mug slept empty, a slice of lemon stuck and dried awkwardly to its rim like a mouth making a face. In the back, a book about mountains lay open face down, spine tired, 2 pages of notes in Lukas' neat hand listing dates and slope angles. In the glove box, a photograph of Pia and the boy. She kept that one, against instructions, because that's what sisters do, and police learn to allow it when the thing taken is only paper and weight. On the third day, a snowfall came unseasonably heavy under the Finn's dying breath and complicated everything. The snow leveled clues and confessed nothing. They staked the likely shelters, the shepherd's cave, the boulder with a crack where someone had left a candle once, and wrote negative in calm block letters. The fourth day, the bulletin said, "New snow on old snow. Weak cohesion. Danger 3, locally 4. That language means you may pass beneath the wrong cornice and the cornice may come. They stood in the small command tent listening to their radios and to loss. The dogs barked, then slept as if they had read the text of the mountain and needed to dream it into something more manageable. 5 days after the last sighting, the search paused. They don't say stopped. They say paused. They say active search suspended pending new information. They say this because people live in places where grammar matters. Pia folded her hands under her coat so tightly that her nails made half moons in her palms. The captain said the sentence he must say and meant, "We will keep listening." He gave her a list of what to do with his place, his car, his name. She went to the studio in Schoen and found the mug rinsed and placed precisely on the right of the sink, the photograph of herself and her son tucked between books, the bracelet clasp empty of wrist in a summer picture he wore to be polite when someone asked for a family shot. After a month, the mountain returned the kind of thing the mountain likes to return: nothing. Snow melted, refroze, and carried the memory of a red jacket down into blue where currents never show themselves. The cabin where the hikers would later go was not on anyone's short list. It sat in an ambiguous grid square, too far for a quick recon and too low to offer good lines. A hut left off the state of mind that guides make the way other men make bread. The hikers who found him came by chance. A storm chased them off their planned traverse to Bricola, and they asked an old man with a farm cart if there was any shelter, and he drew a rectangle in the air with his finger and said, "There is a place where hunters used to play cards. It looks poor." They crossed the Pale of Larch and found the path without a path, only the suggestion of many small choices, and the roof appeared like a ship's hull stuck on land. The door stuck twice and then gave with a cough. The smell inside was not rot. Air does something to a place left to itself that is like the smell of closed books and dull metal. And there he was, contained like an answer to a question nobody had phrased correctly. The diary on the stool had time in it. It began with lists, a guide shorthand. Weather: ridge cloud PM, morning clear. Wind E/SE, later variable. Snow: old, sugared. Rocks dry. Crampons: no. Then notes about the ridge, about a path, like knuckles, about a gap in the old moraine wall where the glacier once pressed it flatter. Then a line that changed the color of the page. Radio fails above the bend. We'll take the cabin if fog closes. Stove okay, T plus peel. A page later, cloud came fast. Heard a crack like someone splitting slate. Not avalanche, not yet. Decided to descend to the old hunter's place. Boots good, left foot rub. Bracelet caught on strap. Pia turned those pages later with the kind of care you give relics. In court and church, relics fracture time into a moment you can touch. The diary did that, page by page, for her. She would think later of the word bracelet appearing on a page like a signal flare from a man who used to make fun of jewelry. The gendarmes photographed the book and flipped one page every time the camera clicked. Night in the cabin. Door swelled. Locked from inside with a wedge and line. Stove works. No mice. Tea okay. Map says little. There is an old calendar on the wall from 1999. The number 7 is circled. The cabin described itself through his hand. He hears things, Arian said softly. He writes like a person who hears. The officer frowned without meaning to, because hearing is too close to imagining when you are paid to anchor the real. The last 5 pages were written smaller. The pencil had been sharpened with a knife and then with a knife again until the point was a splinter. The splinter broke and he sharpened a stub. The language shortened into a telegraph. Fog all day. Boot off. Foot blister like pearl. Bandage from first aid kit. T plus peel. I talk aloud now to keep count of myself. A day later. Snow flew like flour at noon. A day later. 2 ptarmigan walked by and did not see me. A day later. Radio tries but eats battery. I ration the voice. It is an odd idea to ration speech when the thing starving is your power to be heard. He understood economies and lived by them. The gendarmes did not read the last page that day. They bagged the book and the mug in a matchbox he had used, the box so old the fox on its label had turned into a cloud. They touched the bracelet as little as they could, the way you touch a shoulder in a room where someone is grieving and you do not know them well. They took a photograph of the photograph. Pia, her son on her hip, lake light making 2 bars on her cheekbones. The elastic had fused a rectangle pale where the sun had not reached. News travels uphill fast, when downhill has something to say. The Canton paper carried the headline first. Skeleton found in Alpine cabin, diary intact. The piece ran with a photograph of a gendarme ducking through the low door and a caption that named nothing people wanted named. A columnist wrote a respectful paragraph about Lukas being one of those men who kept others safe until the day he did not keep himself. An online forum pulled quotes from a 3-year-old avalanche bulletin as if it were scripture. Avoid steep lee slopes above 2,500 m. Someone wrote C, as if the imperative to avoid had been the same as the geometry of his day. In Shaun, at Lukas' studio, Pia gathered the ordinary spillage of a life. The kettle had limescale like the Alps in miniature. The green mug, rinsed, held a smell of lemon even when empty. She said that to a reporter and then regretted it because it turned into a line that readers thought was poetic. She found his guiding log, the grid of names and dates and altitudes against which he had measured his months. On the inside back cover, in his private small script, she found a list of debts and a reminder. Pay Yuri for film. Buy bratwurst for Nico. He had written bratwurst like a goal. She found 2 straps he had cut shorter and kept because a piece of webbing sometimes saves you when math fails. She found the place on a shelf where a book had been taken before he left, and she could tell which one by the dust shadow. She smiled, because only people who live with books have that sense. The gendarmes returned to the cabin 2 days later with a coroner and a locksmith. The door had been wedged from inside. A simple stick of beech and a line to a nail, the kind of alpine solution a man can work with gloves on. A thin smear of graphite from the pencil marked the table the way a compass metal leaves a faint moon on paper. In the storage shelf, neatly, a coil of 7mm rope lay beside a box of old nails he had not used. On the windowsill, a patch of sunlight outlined the dust in a shape like a map of the lake where the photograph had been taken. Ariane and Benoit left flowers and a note. We will think of your last view when we are afraid. The autopsy returned, in phrases tight to the bone, what the bones had to teach. No trauma, no fracture beyond a small crack in a metatarsal that suggested he had misstepped or kicked stone. Dehydration to the degree that the organs, those that remained, had thinned like paper. A stomach that held only tea and a sliver of rind. A heart that had slowed obediently until obedience killed it. The coroner wrote, under cause, exposure complicated by isolation. Pia folded the paper and unfolded it again until the fold learned it and did not need her help. People have appetites for versions. One version supposes he took the wrong line in fog, felt the mountain turn its face away, and did the sensible thing, shelter, boil water, wait, and then waited longer than a man can. Another supposes he stepped through a roof of snow and tore something inside or in his head, and walked out of habit down into a place where habit cannot supply oxygen. A third, less charitable, says he loved the line too much and went when the bulletin said not to, and it is not tragedy when a man who lives by rules breaks one and pays. Pia had no appetite for that last, and when she read it she stood up and rinsed the mug again, as if rinsing any vessel could wash language off the world. A week after the discovery, a mountaineering magazine called and asked for an interview about the diary. Pia asked what they wanted to know. The editor, to his credit, said, "What we always want to know when a person writes the last sentences he knows he can write." She said she would think about it, and then sat with the book on her lap and counted the vertical slashes his pencil made in the margins as if they were another kind of time. Each mark a day that had to be crossed to be seen. At the base of the last page, below a line drawn with a hand that had been unsteady, there was a notation written smaller than all the rest. The gendarmes had not noticed it at first. The camera had a shadow on that corner, and the technician had a child sick at home and had gone faster than he wanted to. Pia saw it because she knew how small his script got when he wrote for himself and not for the record of anyone else. The last page said, "Snow at dawn. Stove out. Hands don't like knots. Tea helps. The bell carries when there is no wind." Below that, a space. Then, tiny, I heard voices. Not close, not words. Maybe the bell. Maybe stones talking. A line. "Tell Pia I put the photograph in the book so it would not go cold. Then, I was going to bring the bracelet back to Nico if it broke. It has not broken. It keeps me from leaving my hand somewhere. Then the smallest thing. I wish for lemon. Also for after." She read those lines as if they were wires she must not kink. She had the strong urge to brew tea and to cut lemon thin and to carry the mug to a door and set it there, the way a person makes a door into an altar when the world will not give anything else. In a drawer in the cabin, the gendarmes later found an old visitor's book from the 1990s. It had 4 names and a small drawing of a chamois and a line that said, "Storm held us. Cards helped." Lukas had not signed it. He had been not a visitor, but a person who had intersected the cabin the way lines intersect on a map when you trace and your pencil wanders and calls the place a choice. The village of Les Hodiers held a small memorial because villages do. They have rooms that know how to turn themselves into places to contain breath and weather. The priest spoke about maps and truth and humility and weather. He used the word humility a little too often until it lost shine and became the dull, useful metal it is meant to be. The rescue captain stood outside and looked at the ridge. He had a dog's ability to listen to the sky. He thought about a red jacket and a step like 1, 2, 3. He thought about the simple machine of a stove and the complex machine of a human, keeping a list instead of a panic. He lit a cigarette he did not intend to finish and watched the smoke try to draw a line to the serpentine of a cloud. The cabin was closed again after the investigation. The door fixed to turn and close cleanly, the wedge retrieved, the rope coiled. Someone from the commune placed a small plaque inside, just to the left of the door where you see it only when you enter and no longer when you leave, in memory of a mountaineer who waited as the weather asked. May he rest, and those he loved find after. They did not write his name. Names in the mountains have a way of unhooking from faces and living in the mouths of strangers. Sometimes anonymity is a kindness, sometimes a theft, and one can never be certain which. At dusk, when the light in August turns a green that does not exist in winter and the marmots sit upright like questions, you can see the cabin from a shoulder of the moraine. If the fen is sleeping and the sky will allow it, a sound carries, 2 dull clanks from the little bell at the chapel down valley. Those clanks make a road in air. If you listen afterwards, you can imagine you hear a man setting down a mug and counting his fingers and then making the pencil write one more line than the body would have thought possible. In Shaun, Pia tucked the diary into a fabric sleeve she sewed out of an old shirt of his, blue from sun and detergents. The collar frayed. She placed the photograph back under the elastic. She took the silver bracelet. Heat from her palm warmed it, and thought about its circuit. She did not put it on. She laid it on the green mug on her kitchen shelf, an intentional geometry. Circle on circle, metal on enamel, a small microclimate of memory in a room where she kept forgetting to water the basil and then remembering and laughing out loud at herself standing alone. Outside, the rain came the way it does after heat, thundery and apologetic. Up valley the glacier did not notice. The cabin would be quiet again. The enamel would hold its ring. The pencil would lie where it had been placed the last time he placed it. And the last page would still be waiting for someone to decide they were ready to read it to the end, or not, because endings can be kind or only complete, and it is rare for them to be both at once. The forensic reconstruction began with numbers, as it always does. They measured the bones, tibia length consistent with a man 178 centimeters tall, clavicle narrow, dental wear suggesting a lifetime of chewing grit in mountain bred. No trauma of violence, no broken skull, no fracture in the ribs. A single hair still bound to the fabric of his hood was light brown, consistent with old photographs Pia provided. The coroner's report was cautious, likely hypothermia and dehydration, complicated by isolation. The line read dry. Yet everyone who touched the page felt the echo of a man dying with a stove still working, a diary still filling lines, a will still engaged. Police sketched a timeline. He had left Firpical on September 26th. By nightfall, he must have reached the cabin. The diary entries showed 5 full days alive inside. Fog, snow, blister, ptarmigan. His handwriting shrank, but did not break until the final page. Then silence, the kind not even a pencil could cut. The cabin had been sealed from the inside. The wedge and rope were undeniable. This meant he had chosen to close himself in. Whether that was for safety or for fear, no one could say. Investigators returned to the glacier basin in September, a year after the discovery, to retrace his possible line. They carried the diary and matched notes to geography. Gap in the moraine wall, found. Knuckles of rock, found. A series of 5 protrusions above a tarn. Crack like slate split. An icefall collapse had occurred that autumn, locals confirmed. Everything mapped. Yet none of it explained why a man of experience did not descend sooner, did not radio with more persistence, did not leave a trail more visible than the ghost of lemon in his mug. Mountains forgive little, but they rarely deceive. The silence itself felt like a riddle. In Zwiesel, Pia received the diary back from the gendarmes in a padded envelope. She placed it on her kitchen table and did not open it for 2 weeks. She busied herself with her child, with shopping, with sewing, domestic anchors that hold a person until grief has finished circling. One evening, when the boy had gone to bed, she brewed tea and sliced lemon thin as he had liked it. She opened the book. She read every page from the first neat lists to the last trembled scratch. Then she closed it, placed it in a cloth sleeve, and sat for an hour with her hand over it, the way one steadies a body not to stop it from moving, but to keep it from feeling alone. The case file and Herons gathered 3 theories, written like polite arguments in a debate. Theory 1, natural error. Lukas misjudged the fin, underestimated its strength, and when fog turned sudden, he decided not to risk the glacier. He sheltered in the cabin, as he should have. But without food stores and with only tea, he starved and weakened until exposure took him. A simple story, cruel but clean. Theory 2, hidden injury. The cracked metatarsal hinted at a fall or a kick against stone. Perhaps he tore a ligament or struck his head in a way that left no mark on bone. Injured, he limped to the cabin, expecting to recover. Instead, his condition worsened. Isolation compounded injury until he no longer had the strength to leave. Theory 3, the listener. This one entered the report sideways. Through Maria's diary of the nuns, through whispers from the valley. Lukas had written, I heard voices. Not close, not words. Maybe the bell. Maybe stones talking. Locals remembered stories of men who, caught alone in the Alps, heard songs in the wind and never returned. The report couched it carefully. Perceptual disturbance secondary to hypothermia or fatigue. Yet outside the report, in cafes and on forums, people said the mountain had spoken to him, and he had answered by staying. Villagers built their own myths. One old shepherd told a journalist that Lukas had joined the Brotherhood of the Silent Cabins, a fiction he claimed went back centuries. Men who vanished alone and whose bones waited by stoves, diaries open like icons. Teenagers in Schoen painted graffiti near the station, bracelet never broken. A podcaster wove the diary entries into a half-hour of whispers, playing with static to sound like wind through spruce. Pia ignored most of it, but once, in the supermarket, she saw a man reading a magazine article with Lukas's photograph on the cover, and she thought, you will never know him as I do. Put it down. She did not say it aloud. She walked on, bought lemons, and returned home. The commune of Firpical debated whether to mark the cabin. Some wanted a plaque, in memory of a guide who died in service of the mountain. Others said no, let it return to wood and stone. Finally, they compromised. Inside, on the wall near the stove, they placed a small brass plate no larger than a postcard. It bore only a date, 1999 to 2021, and a line from his diary. The bell carries when there is no wind. Hikers who stumbled into the place after storms sometimes missed it entirely. Those who noticed often touched it before leaving, as if to steady themselves. The diary was digitized by the police and, despite Pia's request, leaked online. Readers across Europe scrolled the last page and paused at, I wish for lemon. Also for after. Some mocked it, others called it poetry. A Swiss novelist built an entire book around it, thinly veiling Lukas as the guide. Pia sued and then withdrew the case, realizing no court could erase appropriation. She concentrated instead on the objects she still controlled, the bracelet, the mug, the diary itself. These she kept close, an altar of 3 circles, metal, enamel, paper, each containing him in ways the mountain had refused. In spring, Pia hiked with her son up to the moraine where Lukas had last been seen. She carried the diary in her pack, wrapped against weather, and read aloud some of the calmer entries. Notes about Rock Knuckles, about ptarmigan. The boy listened and then asked, "Did he write about me?" She pointed to a line, "Bring bratwurst for Nico." The boy laughed, though he had no memory of ever eating bratwurst with his uncle. They left a slice of lemon on a flat rock and walked back before fog closed in. The cabin remains. Sometimes its door swells and jams. Sometimes it swings wide to anyone. Inside, dust continues its slow occupation. The stove waits, the brass plaque dulls. On the table, faint still, lies the graphite stain from where Lukas sharpened his pencil one last time. In certain light, it looks like the mark of a compass, drawing a circle no one can erase. Travelers pause, take water from the stream, feel the hush that cabins enforce. Some read the visitor's book. Most leave it blank, unwilling to break the silence. Pia still drinks tea from the green mug. She still keeps the bracelet on the shelf. She still opens the diary once a year, on the anniversary, and rereads the last lines. She has learned to stop searching for secrets between the words. They are not prophecy. They are simply a man's hand pressing pencil to paper until the hand could no longer press. That is enough. The mystery remains. Why did he not walk back? Why did he not shout longer into the radio? Why did he not leave when he could? Perhaps the answer is as simple as the mountain being larger than will. Perhaps it is as complex as a man deciding, in the fog, that to move was more dangerous than to wait. The diary does not decide for us. It closes on the last page, and beyond it there is only the white space of what we imagine. In Valais, when storms roll off the Dent Blanche and swallow the valley, people say they hear bells that are not wrong. Some say it is St. Martin's, some say it is the chapel in Firpical, some say it is Lukas Amsler still listening. The bell carries when there is no wind. Those who believe stop to listen. Those who don't quicken their pace. But everyone, for a moment, hears something in the fog.